Hey, it's Mike with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it is Tuesday. It's September 3rd. I almost said Monday. It's actually Monday on a Tuesday. Hope everybody enjoyed the extended weekend. Nice break for me because I really took off Friday. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday for me, and I didn't really look at email much either. So it was a nice break, and hope everybody else enjoyed it as well. I needed it. But anyway, came back today. A lot of times after a holiday like that, you can expect a big day, but I mean, today was a range day. You can see it. I made the lines a little darker. Uh, Here's your highs for the most part up here that dropped down as the day progressed, and here's your lows down here that really kind of were up here most of the time, but this is really where I would draw it. And you can see the midline in there, which is perfect midline. And you can see prices working both sides of that consistently. So um, that tells you, you can be pretty confident when you get working both sides of that midline that you probably got your lines in the right places. So, but anyway, uh, the range was big enough that where especially like from top to bottom, where there's 20 points in here. That's a nice trend, but really we didn't get that from really about 9 o'clock on. Well, I'd say more in the 9:15 range. From there on, we never got back up to the highs. So this range, and then we never got back down here again. So the range really tightened up, and there's some good trades in here that I marked, but you can see how it's kind of jumbled up. But you can still see that EMA pointing down in the trend lines, and then here we're headed back up. But we were really doing a lot of sideways stuff going into that 2 o'clock hour, and from this point on, I don't see anything I really like. You might have tried to get long here, but we're really not that far away from the EMA. When we back out, you can look at it. It's a possibility. I didn't mark it, but we'll talk about it when we get to it. So I'm going to back out. Still quite a few trades here. Some relatively easy trades, I would say, as well. Nothing too difficult about today. If you understand ranges. But anyway, let me back out where it's a little easier to see everything. You got to get really far out here, and then you can't see the big picture. But it's just all straight across. So that's the reason I kind of backed out to show you the big picture first. But we were trending up from maybe 5 o'clock into when I came in around 7. 7 o'clock's right in here where we bounce. And notice you just came off the high, you come back here, you get a first entry, then you come back down and you test that same support again and get a double test and you bounce, and there's a second entry long when it breaks higher there. And you can see prices took off pretty good. That was a nice entry there early. There's another pullback to the key entry point here, but a very bearish bar, so you can't enter there. But this was a nice trade right at the 7 o'clock hour. And again, I'll say it again, people always ask me what time is it safe to start trading. In my opinion, around 7 o'clock Central Time. I'm on Central Time, so anything much earlier than that, sometimes it'll pick up around 6:30, but to me, it's just not worth it. I usually come in and get started around 7 o'clock, and it's amazing how often there's a nice setup right there, right at the 7 o'clock hour. So it tends to be a good time to start. So I like starting then, and so, and you would expect, I mean, this looks like a range, and you'd expect we'd probably try to come back up and test these highs again. But I like that double test, second entry long off the trend line there as well. Moves on up. We actually come back to that trend line a couple more times here, but they're just not very good setups. This one was very tempting, and you really could argue for this one. I didn't mark it. But notice the new high, and you get a first entry, and then you get a second entry here. But you already had a possible trend line working down, and you had to go long right into that. Although we did have this trend line working up, and that's the first close outside. So this is where it starts to get, hey, I need to look at the big picture. I need to look at the context overall. And the context overall was we'd had a lot of resistance right across there. So the key would be, do you have enough room to get out? Which you do. And notice you went right up to those same heights, and that's where you turn down. And there's plenty of room here. So I would at least give that one a green. And the reason I really don't like blue is because notice there's 1, 2, 3, 4. And none of those are dojis, but you're still going really flat and sideways there. And your second entry really triggers right here, but when it tests it again and fails, you may take that trade. There is the trend line. Technically, it's really not a second entry because it broke higher here, and there's a little bit of congestion. But there's really 2 legs down, and there's a move up there. So you may take that one. I'm going to leave it green, but it looked like I was, I'm thinking it's probably going to be a trap. That's what I was thinking to myself. And we started running up, and I'm thinking, man, I should have taken that trade. But then in the end, my first gut instinct, I was right. It was a trap, and we ended up going lower. And so even though this is not technically a failure because we got way more than a scalp out of this, I mean, I'm not sure exactly how many ticks is in that bar, but it's a whole bunch. You can see that the range of that's 15, actually 19 ticks. Is that right? Yeah, 19 ticks. That is a huge, huge bar. So that's another issue going short there on a 19 tick bar. But I like going short there. And you couldn't really use any other fancy tricks to get in this one. So, and if you tried to get, of course, you could have easily got your extra ticks to the downside. But you would have had to ride, I mean, I wouldn't say easily you would have got them, but you had to ride out this bouncing a bunch of times. And it really gets uncertain in here, so I don't see anything I like as far as entering. Of course, we do get a break and a new low, but you never really get a good setup here because we got a 2-bar match and it doesn't break there. And then by the time it does break higher, you got a doji, and that's congestion. Of course, usually the reason you get congestion is because prices are in a reversal type area. So you may expect it to reverse, but it may only go back a few ticks and then turn down. So I just don't trust that one. But look what happens. Look how easily it pushes back through the EMA, comes back on a first entry short and then a second entry short, and everything's still above the EMA. And you get a nice second entry long on a failed second entry short. Just came off the midline, so we may be headed back to the highs. So I like going long there. That turns out to be a good trade. It actually comes back and gives you a double test, but you don't get a very good signal bar. So, I mean, technically, you don't want to go long there. Even though it's a nice move up, it's just not worth it. And, of course, you do test this spot several times, but too much congestion, not a very good signal bar. You get a lower high right here. Again, not a very good signal bar. It does come off the key entry point, but it's right there at the midline again. And you got to be careful around that midline. You need good setups. And I just don't see it there. Even though it's a nice move down, you just kind of had to watch it. Now, down here, you might have said, hey, you might be thinking, hey, I might want to go long here because that's the, where we've bounced. That's the overnight lows. If you come back, but if you just can see, we're not quite down there yet. So you don't really have enough evidence that that's going to be the low. You do get a higher low here, so you might say, hey, I'll make this one green if you've got enough room back to the EMA. But again, I just think it's too early because that's the first closes outside that fairly decent trend channel line coming down there. And notice it does turn down again and then bounce. There's a second entry long right there as well. But again, and you do make a new low there. So that's another one you might argue for it to be green. But we're just not that far away from the EMA. Although, again, it is a second entry long. And we do have a break and a new low in place. But I think you're better off to wait on that higher low, which comes here. And not only that, you got a new low. So you got a first entry, a second entry. And you do have some congestion, so a little failed break lower. But this is also a second entry long. New high right here, first entry, second entry. And that's a nice reversal bar that makes a higher low. So you got a double bottom with a higher low. I like going long there. You should at least get a scalp. We're probably going to bouncing that many times and making a higher low there and higher highs as well. You're probably at least coming back to here, and you may go all the way back to here. So that turns out to be a pretty nice move. And then you pull back down first entry, try to go lower again. You get a second entry long right there. Fairly decent signal bar, a little bit higher low than that one. That's a good place to go long. There's actually another setup right here with a lower high, but it didn't break lower. And so I probably wouldn't, if you didn't enter here, I probably wouldn't enter. You might have even considered entering here because there is a hidden second entry long. So that one's even a possibility, but I think you're better off to wait. And you can see most people waited, and then once it took off here, the smarter trader says, hey, we're going higher, and look at it go. And it probably ran out some of the shorts that had gotten short on the way down. We run up to the other side. We'll come back first entry. There's a second entry long right there, but again, not a very good signal bar. We push up, come back, and test that line again and get a second entry, or not a second entry, but a higher low. And look how it bounces off that midline. I like going long there. This is where you would think we might get a nice push up, but we don't. You get a scalp out of it a little more, and then it starts working lower, and you get a failed second entry long right here because that's a new high, first entry, and then second entry. And the only problem I have with this one is that it's right into that midline, but it is also almost a repeat pattern of this right here. It looks very similar to that. You can see that. So I like that one. I only made it green because it is into this midline. You got to be careful there because you just had the midline acting as support, and now you're still above it, so you don't know for sure you're going to get through there, but it does. And then we bounce here. There's actually a failed second entry short right here. Again, the reason I don't like this one is because we're right back into that midline, and it's been acting as resistance now. It was acting as support. Now it's acting as resistance. And this is where you got to be really careful because you'll get tripped up here. It does push on through, comes back, and now it makes a higher low, and it bounces off that midline. It actually broke lower right into that midline, and that's a good reason why you wouldn't want to go short there too. And then it turns and goes out the other side. I like going long there. And you would have had to ride this out before it bounces, but you wouldn't have got stopped out if you put your stop where it goes. I mean, it's hard to ride those out, so you may have said, hey, and got scared and exited. And I did only make that one green because it's just a little bit iffy. But we do end up taking off right here. When it went higher, it probably trapped some people. Again, I don't like it. I think you're better off to skip it. You may have entered here because it broke higher and turned and went out the other side. It is a lower high, and we do have some previous resistance across there. So you might have entered there too. And you do have a break of this one with two legs up. So I'm only going to make that one green though. But it's a possibility. You're better off to wait on your reversal, which comes here. You actually would enter when it broke below this line because that's when it becomes a failure. But your stop has to go above this bar. So that's reading the markers right there because you do have to put your stop above that bar. It's technically your signal bar, although the entry would have been below this very bearish bar right here. And then it comes back, and you get another entry right there. But and you do have a hidden second entry there. And there has been some resistance across here. That's where we actually are trading right now. So you can see that's been an important point. So again, there's another one you might argue to be at least green. But I think you're better off to wait on a lower high here. And then you have to be careful on a lower high because it's right into that midline. But notice what happens. This thing ends up closing way down here. If it breaks below that, you'll probably get a scalp out of it, which you do get an easy scalp. It doesn't go much further, and it bounces and comes back. And there's actually another second entry short right here. But the fact that we couldn't get through that midline and we're back here going right back short into it. I wasn't crazy about it. You did get some resistance underneath here, but you got some support across here. So when it pushes through and pulls back and gives you a failed second entry long, and it does kind of set up that key entry point on that trend line coming down, we're below the EMA. We've double tested this. Notice we've tested it once, twice. So I like entering there. And then there's another chance to enter right here when it comes back to that key entry point and confirms it and gives you a fairly bearish bar. If it breaks lower there, we may be headed all the way back down. We actually go a little bit further there. That turns out to be a really good setup there. And then we bounce. Again, if this was a big bullish bar and you were a little bit further away from the EMA, I might trade this on a failed break lower, but I'd wait on a higher low here. And you get one here, not a good setup. You get another one here, not a good setup. You finally get a higher low here, but look at all that congestion, how we're just going sideways there. Failed second entry short right here, but again, there's lots of resistance, lots of sideways stuff, and it's just being that close to 2 o'clock. I don't see anything there I like. We finally did come back to the trend line here and got another entry, but you can see we're just going side, lots of congestion going. The market's just really undecided all the way through here, even though it's a slight upward bias, which is what you would expect in the bigger context, because hey, what happened? We're in a range and we just came off the lows. Even though that's not the overnight lows, we'd had quite a bit of, that'd been the low pretty much since 9:30 that morning, and we're coming off of it. So we're probably at least coming back to where the highs were most of the afternoon, which was right in here. I probably would have still had that a little lower at that point, so you would expect prices to probably come back to here at a very minimum. I mean, that's what the context, the bigger picture is telling you. So even though we're really creeping up here in the big picture, you would expect prices to bounce off these lows and go back to the highs. It's a range day, and you're gonna, doesn't mean that's what's going to happen, but that's what you're expecting. And but also at the same time, you've got a trend line working down through here, and prices can't get through it. So that's a very dangerous place to enter in there, especially at 2 o'clock. So here, even if you didn't see the bigger picture range, you do have a trend line that I actually drew off these lows and drug up. And it looks like we got a little overshoot, and then we're holding. So you would expect prices to be shooting back to this line. And then you never really get a setup over there to go short or long. So best just to sit tight and say, hey, it's too late in the day. I'm not going to take a trade. But if you do take a trade, you got to go with the big picture context, which say, hey, I want to go long here, and that's what wins out. But that's not always the case 100%. Sometimes the bigger context doesn't win out instantly. You might have turned back down here and then went higher. So you're better off just, sometimes no trade is the best trade. And that's one of those cases where I feel like that's it. And there it is, a bigger picture. Look at it from the, a little bit further out. You can see it's all sideways. And you can see the EMA going up and down, and prices swinging above and below. And you can trade that both ways. You just need to follow the range rules when you do. So anyway, that's what I saw today. I like these kind of days. This is not exactly my favorite kind of range day because there was too much action around the midline, the center of the range, and that makes it harder. The way I like these is when you got a consistent turn off the lows down here and a consistent turn every time off the highs up here. It's like clockwork. You can almost, it's so predictable, and it makes it much easier. So this was not an easy, what I call an easy range day. This is a little bit more difficult one because the highs were moving around and the lows were moving around. Even though it got a little bit consistent here late in the afternoon, it did get a little bit easier because it tightened up and you did get some more consistent lows and consistent highs. But again, we still were doing a lot of swinging around that bigger picture midline. And that's where it's always, you got to be real careful. So anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. Hope you had a good Monday on Tuesday. We'll be back again to do it tomorrow. It's going to be a short week because we've only got 3 trading days in this week. No chart lessons on Fridays. So anyway, I'll be back again to do it tomorrow. I'm done for today. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.